The sun was setting over Miller's Creek, Pennsylvania, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. But Martha Rodriguez couldn't see the beauty. All she could see was the empty space in her backyard where her 3-year-old granddaughter, Emma, had been playing just hours ago. "Emma, Emma," Martha's voice cracked as she called out for what felt like the 1,000th time. Her daughter, Sophia, was somewhere in the woods behind the house, her screams growing more desperate with each passing minute. The family barbecue that had started so perfectly that Saturday afternoon had turned into every parent's worst nightmare. It had happened so fast. One moment, Emma was giggling on the swing set, her pigtails bouncing as she pumped her little legs. Martha had turned away for just 2 minutes, maybe 3, to check on the burgers. When she looked back, the swing was empty, moving gently in the breeze like a ghost was sitting there. Now, as darkness crept across the Pennsylvania landscape, over 200 volunteers from the small town of Millerville had joined the search. They moved through the dense forest in organized lines, their flashlights creating an eerie constellation of moving stars among the trees. The local fire department had arrived with floodlights. The state police had sent additional units, but Emma Rodriguez remained missing. Sheriff Tom Bradley stood at the command post, a folding table set up in Martha's driveway, studying a topographical map of the area. The woods behind the Rodriguez property stretched for miles, eventually connecting to an abandoned industrial area where an old textile mill had been rotting for the past 15 years. There were ravines, a creek swollen from recent rains, and countless places where a small child could fall, get trapped, or worse. "Sheriff, we found something." A volunteer's voice crackled over the radio at 9:04 p.m. Bradley's heart jumped. "What is it?" "Her shoes, sir, both of them, about half a mile into the woods near the creek bed. They're covered in mud." Sophia's anguished wail could be heard across the entire property. She collapsed into her husband Miguel's arms, her body shaking with sobs. Every parent in that crowd felt it. That cold dread that starts in your stomach and spreads through your entire body like ice water. Bradley knew the statistics. He'd been in law enforcement for 28 years, and he knew them by heart. After the first few hours, the chances of finding a missing child unharmed dropped significantly. After 12 hours, they dropped even more. They were now at 18 hours, and with temperatures forecast to drop into the low 40s overnight, with possible rain, hypothermia became a very real threat for a 3-year-old in just a dress and no shoes. But there was something else bothering Bradley, something he hadn't shared with the family yet. Emma's shoes had been found side by side, placed neatly on a rock. That wasn't consistent with a child simply wandering off and losing them. That suggested someone had removed them, or that Emma had taken them off herself for a reason. The rain started at 9:47 p.m., a cold drizzle that quickly turned into a steady downpour. It washed away scent trails, made the terrain more dangerous, and forced some of the volunteers, especially those with young children at home, to reluctantly abandon the search until morning. Sophia refused to leave, standing in the rain, her clothes soaked through, still calling her daughter's name into the darkness. Bradley made a decision. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact he reserved for the worst situations, Officer Jake Morrison, K-9 unit. Morrison answered on the second ring. "Sheriff." "Jake, I need you and Rex. Now. We've got a 3-year-old missing in the woods behind the old mill, 18 hours and counting. Rain's washing away the scent and we're running out of time." There was a brief pause. Bradley could hear a dog barking in the background, Rex, no doubt, already sensing something was happening. "We're 20 minutes out," Morrison said without hesitation. Rex was a 7-year-old German Shepherd with an impressive record. In his career as a search and rescue dog, he'd located 43 missing persons. 39 of them had been found alive. Those 4 failures, those 4 people they'd found too late, haunted Morrison. He never forgot a single name, a single face from the family photographs he'd been shown. He wasn't going to let Emma Rodriguez become number 5. As Morrison's K9 unit vehicle pulled into the muddy driveway at 10:15 p.m., Rex was already alert in the back, his ears perked, his body tense with readiness. Morrison grabbed Emma's favorite stuffed rabbit from Sophia. She'd been clutching it since Emma disappeared, and held it down for Rex to smell. The dog's nose worked furiously, memorizing the scent. Then he looked up at Morrison with those intelligent brown eyes, and Morrison knew Rex was ready. "Show me where you found the shoes," Morrison said to Bradley. They made their way through the dark forest, rain dripping from the trees, the beam of Morrison's high-powered flashlight cutting through the darkness. When they reached the creek, Morrison held out the stuffed rabbit again. "Rex, find Emma." The German shepherd's nose immediately went to the ground. He circled the area once, twice, then locked onto something. His body language changed, ears forward, tail straight out, every muscle focused on the invisible trail only he could detect. And then Rex took off into the darkness, pulling Morrison deeper into the woods, away from the search parties, away from the floodlights and the voices, into a part of the forest where the old mill loomed like a sleeping giant, its broken windows staring down at them like empty eyes. Morrison's radio crackled. "Morrison, what's your location?" He checked his GPS. "Heading southeast toward the old industrial area. Rex has got something." What Morrison didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that Emma Rodriguez wasn't just lost. She was hiding from something, hiding from someone. And what she'd seen in these woods, what she'd witnessed just before she disappeared, would crack open a criminal case that had left police baffled for 3 months. But first, they had to find her. They had to find her alive. Rex suddenly stopped, his nose in the air, and then he veered sharply to the left, moving faster now, more urgent. Morrison's heart pounded as he ran to keep up, branches whipping at his face, his boots splashing through puddles. Somewhere out there in the darkness, Emma Rodriguez was waiting, and time was running out. The forest seemed to close in around them as Officer Jake Morrison followed Rex deeper into the darkness. The rain had intensified, turning the ground into a slippery mess of mud and wet leaves. Morrison's flashlight beam bounced erratically as he ran, trying to keep pace with the German shepherd who moved with singular purpose through the undergrowth. Rex was in full search mode now, his training and instincts working in perfect harmony. Every few seconds, he'd pause, nose to the ground, recalibrating the scent trail that was being washed away by the relentless rain. Then he'd surge forward again, pulling so hard on the lead that Morrison's shoulder ached. "Come on, boy, where is she?" Morrison muttered, his breath coming in ragged gasps. They'd been moving for nearly 20 minutes, covering ground that the volunteer search parties hadn't reached yet. The terrain had become treacherous, fallen logs, hidden roots, and sudden drops that appeared without warning in the darkness. Behind them, Morrison could hear Sheriff Bradley and 2 other officers trying to keep up, their flashlights bobbing in the distance like fireflies. At exactly 11:47 p.m., Rex stopped so abruptly that Morrison nearly tripped over him. The dog's entire body went rigid, his ears pinned forward, a low whine emanating from his throat. This was it. Morrison had worked with Rex long enough to know this behavior. The dog had found something. "Rex," Morrison knelt beside his partner, following the dog's intense gaze. They were in a small clearing near what looked like an old drainage area for the mill. Massive concrete pipes, some collapsed, others still intact, jutted from the hillside like the bones of some ancient creature. Weeds and vines had overgrown everything, creating a tangled maze of metal and concrete that probably hadn't been disturbed in decades. Rex moved forward slowly now, his training taking over. He approached one of the smaller pipes, maybe 3 feet in diameter, that had partially collapsed into the hillside. The opening was almost completely hidden by overgrown weeds and a fallen branch. Morrison's flashlight caught something, and his heart nearly stopped. Purple fabric, just a glimpse but unmistakable against the dark interior of the pipe. "Emma," Morrison called out, his voice gentle despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Emma Rodriguez, honey, it's the police. You're safe now." Silence, not even the sound of breathing. Morrison keyed his radio with trembling fingers. "Sheriff, I've got her. Coordinates." He rattled off his GPS location. "We need paramedics, now." He turned back to the pipe, moving closer. "Emma, sweetheart, my name is Jake. I'm a police officer and I'm here with my dog, Rex. We're here to take you home to your mommy." This time he heard it, a tiny whimper barely audible over the rain, the sound of a terrified child. Morrison aimed his flashlight into the pipe and his blood ran cold. Emma was there, pressed against the far end of the pipe, maybe 6 feet back. She was curled into a tight ball, her purple dress soaked and muddy, her blonde hair matted to her head. Her face was pale, too pale, and her lips had a bluish tint that Morrison recognized immediately as the early stages of hypothermia. But it was her eyes that struck him most. They were wide with terror, darting frantically between Morrison and the entrance of the pipe, as if she was watching for something, or someone else. "Okay, Emma, I'm going to reach in and get you, all right." Morrison started to crawl toward the pipe entrance. "No," the scream that came from that tiny child was primal, filled with such raw fear that Morrison instinctively pulled back. Emma scrambled further into the pipe, her small hands pressed against the concrete, trying to make herself even smaller. Sheriff Bradley arrived, breathing hard. "What's going on?" "She's terrified," Morrison said quietly. "She won't let me near her. Something's wrong here, Tom. This isn't just a lost kid scared of strangers." Bradley crouched down, his knees creaking. "Emma, honey, it's Sheriff Bradley. Your Grandma Martha makes those chocolate chip cookies I love. Remember me." But Emma only whimpered, her eyes fixed on the entrance of the pipe with an intensity that was unnatural for a 3-year-old. That's when Rex made his move. The German Shepherd had been sitting patiently beside Morrison, watching the little girl with those intelligent eyes. Now, without any command, he dropped onto his belly and began to crawl toward the pipe entrance. "Rex, wait," Morrison started, but something stopped him. Some instinct told him to let the dog work. Rex moved slowly, deliberately, keeping his body low and non-threatening. When he reached the pipe entrance, he didn't try to go inside. Instead, he laid down right at the opening, his big head resting on his paws, and let out the softest whine Morrison had ever heard him make. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. The rain continued to fall. Morrison held his breath. Bradley's hand hovered over his radio, ready to call for backup if needed. Then, barely visible in the darkness of the pipe, a tiny hand emerged. Small fingers, caked with mud and scratched from thorns, reached out tentatively toward Rex's nose. The German Shepherd didn't move. He barely seemed to breathe. He simply let this frightened child touch him, let her confirm that he was real, that he was safe. "Doggy," Emma's voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from hours of crying or screaming or both. "That's right, sweetheart," Morrison said softly, not daring to move. "That's Rex. He's a very good doggy and he's been looking for you." Emma's hand moved from Rex's nose to his ear, then to the top of his head. She was crying now, but differently, not from fear, but from relief. The kind of crying that comes when you've been holding terror inside for so long that you forgot how to let it out. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Emma began to crawl toward the pipe entrance, toward Rex, toward safety. When she emerged, she was shaking violently from cold and fear. Her bare feet were cut and bleeding. She couldn't have weighed more than 30 pounds, and she looked even smaller, covered in mud and soaked to the bone. Morrison quickly stripped off his jacket and wrapped it around her. It swallowed her tiny frame completely, but Emma didn't reach for Morrison. She reached for Rex, her small arms trying to wrap around the dog's neck, her face buried in his fur. Rex found me," she whispered. "The scary man, Rex. Don't let him." Morrison and Bradley exchanged sharp looks over her head. "What scary man, Emma?" Bradley asked gently. But the little girl had gone silent again, clinging to Rex like he was the only solid thing in a world that had become terrifying. The paramedics arrived 7 minutes later, crashing through the brush with a stretcher and medical bags. They quickly assessed Emma: severe hypothermia, dehydration, multiple lacerations, and shock. She needed to get to the hospital immediately. But when they tried to separate her from Rex, Emma's screams echoed through the forest. She held onto the dog with a strength that seemed impossible for someone so small and so weak. "The dog comes with us," the senior paramedic, a woman named Linda Chen, said firmly. "I've seen this before. That animal just saved her life in more ways than one." So Rex rode in the ambulance, his big body taking up most of the floor space, while Emma kept one hand tangled in his fur the entire 15-minute ride to Millerville General Hospital. Morrison sat in the front, his mind racing. A 3-year-old doesn't hide in a drainage pipe for 18 hours because she's lost. She hides because she's running from something, or someone. And as they pulled into the hospital emergency bay, where Sofia Rodriguez stood waiting with tears streaming down her face, Morrison had one thought that he couldn't shake. What did Emma see out there in those woods? And who was the scary man Sofia Rodriguez hadn't slept in 3 days? She sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside Emma's bed, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall, terrified that if she closed her eyes, Emma might disappear again. The doctors said she was stable, treated for hypothermia, dehydrated, covered in cuts and bruises, but stable. Physically, Emma would recover. Emotionally was another story. The little girl hadn't spoken since the ambulance ride. Not to her mother, not to her father Miguel, not to the nurses who came to check her vitals every hour. She would only stare at the ceiling with those haunted eyes, occasionally whimpering when someone approached her bed too quickly. The only time she showed any signs of life was when Officer Morrison visited with Rex. Then, and only then, would Emma's hand reach out from under the blankets to touch the dog's fur. On the second day, a woman arrived who would change everything. Dr. Sarah Williams was a child psychologist who specialized in trauma, particularly with very young children who'd experienced violence or severe fear. She was in her mid-40s, with kind eyes and a gentle voice that seemed to put even the most anxious parents at ease. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Dr. Williams said, sitting down with Sophia in the hospital cafeteria, "I need you to understand something important. Emma isn't just scared. She's traumatized. Whatever happened in those woods, it was more than just getting lost." Sophia's hands trembled around her coffee cup. "What do you mean? She wandered off, got lost, got cold and scared." "No," Dr. Williams interrupted gently. "Children who are simply lost don't hide in drainage pipes for 18 hours. They don't refuse to come out even when rescuers arrive. They don't look at doorways with that level of fear." She paused, choosing her words carefully. Emma was hiding from something specific, and until we understand what that was, we can't help her heal. The therapy sessions began that afternoon. Dr. Williams set up a play area in Emma's hospital room: dolls, toy animals, crayons, paper, building blocks. For the first 2 sessions, Emma didn't engage at all. She just sat in her bed, covers pulled up to her chin, watching Dr. Williams with suspicious eyes. On the 3rd session, Dr. Williams tried something different. She brought a stuffed German shepherd that looked remarkably like Rex. Emma's reaction was immediate. Her hand shot out from under the blankets, reaching for the toy. For the first time in days, something resembling life flickered in her eyes. "You like the doggy?" Dr. Williams asked softly, handing Emma the stuffed animal. Emma clutched it to her chest and nodded. "That's Rex, isn't it? The police doggy who found you." Another nod. "Rex is very brave. He helped you when you were scared." For the first time since the hospital, Emma spoke. The scary man. Her voice was barely a whisper. Dr. Williams kept her expression neutral, though her pulse quickened. "What scary man, Emma?" But the little girl had gone silent again, her face buried in the stuffed dog's fur. Dr. Williams tried another approach. She laid out crayons and paper on the rolling bed tray. "Emma, sometimes when we can't use words, we can draw pictures. Would you like to draw something for me?" At first, Emma didn't move. Then slowly, her small hand reached for a black crayon. What she drew over the next 15 minutes made Dr. Williams' blood run cold. The drawing was crude, as all 3-year-old drawings are stick figures and simple shapes, but the content was unmistakable. A large stick figure man holding what looked like a shovel, red scribbles on the ground, a smaller stick figure, clearly Emma herself, hiding behind a tree, and something else, something that made Dr. Williams lean closer. The large stick figure had something on his arm. Emma had drawn it carefully, using multiple colors. It looked like patterns, like markings. "Emma, what's this on the man's arm?" Dr. Williams pointed gently. "Pictures on his skin," Emma whispered. "Colors like Mommy's friend." Dr. Williams felt her stomach drop. Tattoos. The man had tattoos. Over the next few days, Emma created more drawings. Each one revealed more details. The man had been digging. He had a big bag. Emma drew it in red and black. He'd put something in the ground, and then he'd seen her. The final drawing showed the stick figure man with angry eyes looking directly at little Emma. "He saw me," Emma told the stuffed Rex during one session, her voice trembling. I ran so fast, but he was coming. I could hear him. So I hid in the tunnel and I was very, very quiet." Dr. Williams recorded everything meticulously. She also noticed something crucial. Emma would only speak freely about the events when she was holding the stuffed Rex, or during Officer Morrison's visits with the real Rex. The dog had become her security, her anchor to safety. Detective Maria Santos arrived at the hospital on day 5 with a grim expression. She'd been investigating a series of burglaries and robberies in the Tri-County area, and Emma's story had triggered something. "Dr. Williams," Santos said, studying Emma's drawing spread across the consultation room table, "3 months ago there was an armed robbery at Prestige Jewelers about 60 miles from here. The perpetrator got away with approximately $85,000 in jewelry, cash from the safe, and the store owner's personal handgun. We've had no leads. The guy wore a mask, but security cameras caught something. Distinctive sleeve tattoos on both arms. Geometric patterns with colors." Dr. Williams pointed to Emma's drawing. "Like this." Santos nodded slowly. "Exactly like that." The detective made a call, and within 2 hours, a search team had been deployed to the woods behind Martha Rodriguez's house. They used Emma's drawings as a crude map. The big tree she'd indicated, the area near where her shoes had been found, close to the creek bed. At 4:47 p.m. they found it. Recently disturbed earth, poorly concealed beneath leaves and branches. They dug carefully, methodically, their shovels hitting something solid about 2 feet down. A black duffel bag, still damp from the rain. Inside, diamond rings, necklaces, watches, bundled cash totaling $47,000, and a Glock 19 handgun with the serial number filed off. Everything matched the inventory from the Prestige Jewelers robbery. Detective Santos spread crime scene photos across a table, stills from the security footage showing the robbers' tattooed arms. Then she began compiling a list of everyone who had been at the Rodriguez family barbecue that day. There were 37 names. She started running background checks, looking for anyone with a criminal history, anyone with visible tattoos, anyone who didn't quite fit. On the 18th name, she stopped. Her hand froze over the keyboard. Marcus Chen, age 34, handyman, had done work for the Rodriguez family twice in the past year, once fixing their deck, once repairing their fence. Had been at the barbecue, invited by Martha because he'd done such good work and seemed like a nice young man. Santos pulled up Chen's driver's license photo. Then she pulled up his arrest record, 2 priors for theft, both over a decade ago, charges dropped. No recent activity. He'd seemed to have gone straight. But it was the next photo that confirmed everything. A social media picture from Chen's profile taken at a beach 2 summers ago. He was shirtless, arms extended, showing off extensive tattoo work. Geometric patterns, blues, reds, greens, covering both forearms. Exactly like Emma had drawn. Santos felt her hands go numb. This man had been at the barbecue. He'd been there when Emma wandered into the woods. He'd hidden the robbery evidence nearby, probably planning to retrieve it later. And when a 3-year-old child had stumbled upon him burying it, he'd made a choice. He'd followed her, not to help her get back to the party, not to keep her safe. He'd followed her to make sure she couldn't tell anyone what she'd seen. Emma hadn't just gotten lost in the woods. She'd been running for her life, hunted by a man who'd already committed armed robbery and who couldn't afford to leave a witness behind. She'd hidden in that pipe for 18 hours, silent and terrified, because her 3-year-old mind understood that if the scary man found her, something very bad would happen. Detective Santos closed her laptop and reached for her phone. They needed to bring Marcus Chen in for questioning. Now. But there was a bigger problem looming on the horizon, one that would tear through the legal system like a storm. How do you prosecute someone when your only eyewitness is 3 years old? Prosecutor Janet Harper had been with the district attorney's office for 12 years. She'd handled murder cases, gang violence, complex fraud schemes. But sitting in her office at 11 p.m., staring at a 3-year-old's crayon drawings, she felt more helpless than she ever had in her career. The evidence was circumstantially damning. They'd arrested Marcus Chen 6 hours ago at his apartment. He denied everything, of course, claimed he'd left the barbecue early, said he'd never been near those woods, insisted someone was trying to frame him. His lawyer, Robert Hutchinson, was already filing motions, demanding they release his client due to insufficient evidence. And technically, Hutchinson was right. Without Emma's testimony, their case was built on circumstantial evidence. Yes, Chen had tattoos that matched the security footage. So did thousands of other people. Yes, he'd been at the barbecue. So had 36 other people. Yes, the buried evidence was near the Rodriguez property, but they couldn't prove Chen had put it there. The only person who could definitively place Marcus Chen at that burial site, who could testify that she'd seen him digging, who could identify him as the scary man who chased her through the woods, was a traumatized 3-year-old who wouldn't speak to anyone except a German Shepherd police dog. Harper's phone rang. It was Dr. Sarah Williams. "Janet, we need to talk about Emma." They met at an all-night diner, both women exhausted, both knowing they were fighting against impossible odds. Dr. Williams stirred her coffee absently, her expression troubled. "I've been working with traumatized children for 15 years, she began. "I've seen kids who witnessed murders, survived abuse, lived through horrors no child should ever experience. But Emma, she's one of the youngest I've ever worked with, and her trauma response is severe." "Can she testify?" Harper asked bluntly. "I need to know if it's even possible." Dr. Williams was quiet for a long moment. "In traditional circumstances, no, absolutely not. She can barely speak to her own parents. She has panic attacks when anyone approaches her too quickly. She refuses to leave her hospital room. She wets the bed every night from terror. Putting her on a witness stand in a courtroom full of strangers with Marcus Chen staring at her from the defense table, it would re-traumatize her completely. I couldn't ethically recommend it." Harper felt her case crumbling. So we're done. A man who terrorized a 3-year-old child, who left her to die of exposure in the woods, who would have let her freeze to death to protect himself. He walks free. "I didn't say that." Dr. Williams leaned forward. "I said in traditional circumstances, but there's something extraordinary happening with Emma, something I've only seen a few times in my career." She pulled out her tablet and showed Harper video footage from Emma's therapy sessions. In the first clips, Emma was unresponsive, staring blankly, not engaging with toys or activities. Then Dr. Williams played a clip from 3 days ago. Officer Morrison had brought Rex for a visit. The moment the German Shepherd entered the room, Emma's entire demeanor changed. Her eyes focused, her body relaxed, and most importantly, she began to talk. Rex, the man, had a shovel, Emma was saying in the video, her small hand buried in the dog's fur. He was digging and digging. Then he put the bag in the ground. It was a big red bag. Harper watched, stunned, as Emma proceeded to describe the entire incident in remarkable detail, but only while speaking directly to Rex, as if the dog was the only one in the room. "She won't talk to me, to her parents, to the nurses," Dr. Williams explained. "But with Rex, she opens up. It's called animal-assisted therapy, and in extreme trauma cases, it can be incredibly effective. The dog provides a sense of safety that humans can't replicate right now." "Are you suggesting," Harper started, the idea forming in her mind even as she spoke it aloud. "I'm suggesting that if Emma is going to testify, and that's still a big if, Rex needs to be there. Not in the courthouse, not in the building, in the actual courtroom within Emma's sight and touch." Harper sat back, her mind racing through legal precedents, courtroom procedures, defense objections. I don't even know if that's allowed. A police dog in the courtroom during testimony. "It's been done," Dr. Williams said. "Facility dogs, therapy dogs. There are cases in at least 23 states where dogs have been present for vulnerable witnesses. Children with developmental disabilities, sexual assault victims, people with severe PTSD. But," she paused, "never with a child this young, and never in a case this high profile." Over the next 2 weeks, Harper threw herself into research. She found case law from Washington, Arizona, New York, instances where courthouse facility dogs had been present during testimony. She compiled medical studies on animal-assisted therapy. She interviewed psychologists, veterinarians, K9 handlers. She built a case not just against Marcus Chen, but for Emma's right to testify in a way that wouldn't destroy her. But Marcus Chen's attorney, Robert Hutchinson, was building his own case. When Harper filed her motion to allow Rex in the courtroom, Hutchinson's response was scathing. "Your Honor," he argued at the preliminary hearing, "this is nothing more than a circus act designed to manipulate the jury. A cute little girl, a heroic police dog, it's prejudicial in the extreme. My client has the right to a fair trial, not a theatrical performance designed to tug at heartstrings." Judge Margaret Torres, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for running a tight courtroom, listened impassively. "Ms. Harper, I'm inclined to agree with the defense. This is highly irregular." Harper stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to call Dr. Sarah Williams to explain the medical necessity." Dr. Williams took the stand and laid out Emma's condition in clinical terms. The selective mutism, the severe anxiety, the way her trauma response shut down all communication, except with Rex. "Without the dog present, Emma cannot testify. It's not that she won't, she literally cannot. Her trauma response prevents it. But with Rex there, she feels safe enough to access those memories and verbalize them." Hutchinson cross-examined aggressively. "Dr. Williams, isn't it true that a 3-year-old's memory is notoriously unreliable, that they're highly suggestible, that they can't distinguish between reality and fantasy?" "In general, young children can be suggestible," Dr. Williams admitted. "But Emma's memories are incredibly specific. She's provided details that have been corroborated by physical evidence, and she's been consistent across multiple sessions." "Consistent in what she tells a dog," Hutchinson's voice dripped with skepticism. "Your Honor, this is absurd. The defense moves to exclude this testimony entirely. A 3-year-old is not a competent witness." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Torres looked at Emma's crayon drawings, admitted as exhibits. She looked at the photos of the recovered evidence. She looked at Marcus Chen, sitting calmly at the defense table, and then at Sofia Rodriguez in the gallery, her face hollow from weeks of anguish. I'm going to allow a competency hearing, Torres finally said. We'll bring the child into chambers, not a formal courtroom setting, and I'll determine if she's capable of understanding the difference between truth and lies, if she can recall events accurately, and if she can communicate that information. Ms. Harper, if your witness cannot demonstrate basic competency, this entire discussion is moot. And the dog, Your Honor? Harper asked. Torres sighed. The dog can be present for the competency hearing. But Ms. Harper, if I allow this to proceed to trial, that animal will be behind a partition where the jury cannot see it. I will not have this case decided on sympathy for a child and a dog rather than on facts. Harper left the courthouse with mixed feelings. She'd won the first battle. Emma would get her chance to prove she could testify, but the war was far from over. That evening, she visited Emma at the hospital with Officer Morrison and Rex. The little girl was being discharged the next day, physically healed but emotionally fragile. Emma, Harper said gently, kneeling beside the bed where Emma sat hugging Rex, we're going to need your help to make sure the scary man can't hurt anyone else. Do you think you can be brave? Emma looked at Rex, her small hand stroking his ear. Will Rex be there? Yes, sweetie, Rex will be right there with you. Emma thought for a long moment. Then she whispered, Rex is brave. I can be brave too. Harper felt tears prick her eyes. This tiny child who'd survived something no one should have to endure was willing to face her nightmare again. For justice, for safety, for the truth. They had 30 days until the competency hearing. 30 days to prepare a 3-year-old to face the man who tried to silence her forever. 30 days to prove that sometimes justice requires us to do things that have never been done before. And 30 days for Marcus Chen to sit in his cell, confident that a toddler and a dog could never take him down. He had no idea what was coming. Judge Margaret Torres hadn't slept well in weeks. Every night she lay awake in her bedroom, staring at the ceiling, weighing the impossible decision before her. On her nightstand sat 2 folders, one containing legal precedents and case law, the other containing photos of Emma Rodriguez's scraped knees and the drawings of a terrified child. Torres had been a judge for 18 years. She'd sent murderers to prison, presided over death penalty cases, made decisions that altered the course of people's lives. But this case was different. This case asked her to choose between legal tradition and common sense, between procedure and justice, between protecting a defendant's rights and protecting a child's ability to speak her truth. The competency hearing had been scheduled for a Friday morning in her chambers, a less formal setting than a courtroom, but still intimidating for a 3-year-old. Torres had cleared her entire schedule. This wasn't something that could be rushed. But first, she had to survive the onslaught of motions from Robert Hutchinson. Hutchinson was one of the most expensive defense attorneys in Pennsylvania, and Marcus Chen's family had somehow scraped together the money to hire him. He was in his early 50s, silver-haired, with a reputation for aggressive tactics and a win record that made prosecutors nervous. He arrived at Torres' chambers with a stack of motions 3 inches thick. Your Honor, I'm filing for dismissal of all charges based on witness incompetency, he began, not bothering with pleasantries. Additionally, I'm moving to exclude the dog from any proceeding. I have case law from 15 states showing that the presence of therapy animals has been deemed prejudicial. In which cases? Torres interrupted, flipping through his brief. California versus Morrison, 2019. The appeals court found that that case involved a therapy dog sitting in the gallery, visible to the jury throughout the entire trial, Torres said, having already read it. The court found it prejudicial because the jury could see the dog comforting the witness, which implied vulnerability. Ms. Harper has already agreed the dog will be behind a partition, out of the jury's view. Hutchinson's jaw tightened. Your Honor, the very presence of a police dog in a courtroom is not unusual, Torres countered. K-9 officers testify regularly with their partners present. Those dogs aren't cuddling with witnesses. Hutchinson's voice rose. Your Honor, I must protest in the strongest possible terms. This entire proceeding is a mockery of justice. A 3-year-old child cannot be a reliable witness. The developmental psychology is clear. Children this age have limited memory capacity. They confuse dreams with reality. They're easily influenced by leading questions. And now the prosecution wants to parade this child in front of a jury with a trained police dog as her emotional support animal. It's manipulative, it's prejudicial, and frankly, it's desperate. Torres let him finish his tirade. Then she spoke quietly. Mr. Hutchinson, are you familiar with the case of State versus Danner? Yes, Your Honor, but... In that case, a 4-year-old was deemed competent to testify about witnessing domestic violence. The court found that while young children may have limitations, they can still provide reliable testimony about events they personally witnessed, especially traumatic events which tend to create strong memories. Emma Rodriguez is 3, Your Honor, 3. She still watches cartoons. She probably believes in Santa Claus. She provided specific details that led to the recovery of stolen property, Torres interrupted. Details that have been corroborated by physical evidence. That suggests her memory of the event is quite clear. Hutchinson changed tactics. Then let's discuss my client's rights. Marcus Chen has the right to face his accuser. How can he exercise that right when his accuser is hiding behind a dog, speaking in whispers that may or may not be accurately heard? How can he receive a fair trial when the very setup of the courtroom is designed to elicit sympathy for the prosecution's witness? Torres leaned back in her chair. These were valid points, ones that had kept her up at night. What would you suggest, Mr. Hutchinson? That we simply don't allow the child to testify at all? Yes, he said bluntly. Exactly that. Your Honor, without this witness, the prosecution has a weak circumstantial case. But that's their problem, not ours. The law shouldn't bend itself into a pretzel to accommodate a witness who fundamentally cannot meet the basic standards of testimony. After Hutchinson left, Prosecutor Janet Harper made her case. Your Honor, Emma Rodriguez is competent. She understands the difference between truth and lies. She remembers what she saw, and she can communicate it with appropriate accommodations. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires courts to provide reasonable accommodations for witnesses with disabilities. Emma's PTSD is a disability. The dog is her accommodation. The ADA applies to physical and mental disabilities, Torres pointed out. Is there precedent for applying it to trauma-based conditions in a witness this young? There's precedent for facility dogs with adult PTSD victims, Harper said. And there's precedent for accommodating young witnesses. We're asking the court to extend both principles to this case. Torres studied the prosecutor. You're asking me to set new legal precedent. I'm asking you to let a child tell the truth, Harper said simply. Emma didn't ask to be a witness. She didn't ask to see a crime. She certainly didn't ask to be hunted through the woods by a man trying to silence her. But she survived, Your Honor, and she deserves the chance to be heard. The day of the competency hearing arrived cold and gray. Torres had transformed her chambers into a more child-friendly space. She'd brought in a small table, some toys, had even hung up a few colorful posters. But she knew no amount of decoration could erase the intimidation of what they were asking this child to do. Emma arrived holding her mother's hand, with Officer Morrison and Rex walking beside them. The little girl wore a yellow dress with white flowers, her blonde hair in pigtails. She looked impossibly small. Torres introduced herself gently. Hi, Emma. My name is Judge Torres. Do you know what a judge is? Emma shook her head, her eyes wide. A judge is someone who helps make sure everyone follows the rules and tells the truth. That's my job, to make sure everyone is fair and honest. Can you help me with that? A tiny nod. Emma, do you know the difference between the truth and a lie? The little girl thought for a moment. Truth is real. Lies are when you say something that's not real. Tors felt a small surge of hope. That's right. If I said my hair was purple, would that be the truth or a lie? Emma actually smiled a little. A lie, your hair is gray. Tors chuckled. You're absolutely right. Now, Emma, if someone asked you to tell them what you ate for breakfast, would you tell them the truth or make something up? The truth, Emma said. Mommy says always tell the truth. For the next 20 minutes, Tors asked gentle questions, establishing that Emma could distinguish reality from fantasy, that she understood the importance of honesty, that she could recall specific events from her past. Every answer was appropriate, thoughtful, and accurate for her age. But when Tors asked Emma to talk about the day in the woods, the little girl froze. Her breathing quickened. Her hands balled into fists. Emma, Tors said softly, can you tell me what happened that day? Silence. Emma's eyes darted to the door as if she was planning an escape route. Dr. Sarah Williams, who'd been observing quietly, spoke up. Your Honor, may Officer Morrison bring Rex closer? Tors nodded. The moment Rex moved to Emma's side, the transformation was visible. The little girl's hand immediately went to the dog's fur. Her breathing slowed, and she began to speak, not to Tors, not to the adults in the room, but to Rex. Rex, I was playing on the swing, Emma said quietly. Then I went to find Grandma's cat, and I saw the man. He had a shovel, Rex, and a big bag. He was digging and digging by the big tree. Tors watched, fascinated, as Emma proceeded to recount the entire incident. Marcus Chen's tattoos, the red duffel bag, the way he'd seen her and started coming toward her, how she'd run until her shoes fell off, how she'd hidden in the dark tunnel and stayed very quiet because the scary man was looking for me. The child's account was detailed, consistent with her previous statements, and delivered with an emotional authenticity that was impossible to fake. When she described hiding in the pipe, Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. I was so scared, Rex. I thought he would find me. I thought I would be lost forever. When Emma finished, there were tears in Sofia Rodriguez's eyes. Even Tors found herself deeply moved. Hutchinson, who'd been watching with barely concealed frustration, stood. Your Honor, I'd like to ask the witness some questions. Tors hesitated. Cross-examination of a 3-year-old was delicate territory. You may ask questions, Mr. Hutchinson, but keep them simple and non-threatening. Hutchinson approached carefully. Emma, how old are you? Emma held up 3 fingers. And do you watch TV? Sometimes. Do you like cartoons? Yes. Do you know that cartoons aren't real, that they're make-believe? Emma nodded. So sometimes things on TV aren't real, right? Right, Emma agreed. Emma, when you were in the woods, were you very scared? Another nod. And when we're scared, sometimes we imagine things that aren't really there, don't we? Like monsters under the bed. Emma frowned, sensing a trap even at 3 years old. She turned to Rex. Rex, the man was real, I saw him. Tors made her decision. I'm ruling that Emma Rodriguez is competent to testify. The trial will proceed. Rex will be present but positioned behind a partition. Mr. Hutchinson, you'll have your chance to present your defense. She looked at the calendar. Trial begins December 14th, 30 days from today. Use that time wisely, both of you. As everyone filed out, Tors looked at Marcus Chen, who'd been sitting quietly throughout the hearing. He caught her gaze and smiled, a cold, confident smile that said he thought he'd already won. But he hadn't seen what Tors had seen. A 3-year-old girl finding her voice, finding her courage, finding her truth. The real battle was just beginning. December 14th dawned cold and bright over Millerville, Pennsylvania. Outside the courthouse, news vans lined the street 3 deep, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like flowers seeking sun. Reporters from CNN, Fox News, NBC and dozens of local stations clutched coffee cups and checked their cameras, waiting for any glimpse of the players in what had become the most talked-about trial in the state. The story had gone viral 2 weeks earlier when a leaked courthouse document revealed that a 3-year-old would testify with the help of a police dog. Social media had exploded. Justice for Emma trended on Twitter. Parenting forums debated whether a child so young should be put through such trauma. Legal experts appeared on talk shows arguing both sides. Even international news outlets had picked up the story. But inside her small apartment, Sofia Rodriguez wasn't thinking about media coverage or viral hashtags. She was trying to get her daughter to eat breakfast. "Just 3 bites, me amor," Sofia pleaded, holding out a spoonful of oatmeal. "You need to be strong today." Emma sat at the kitchen table in her purple dress. She'd refused to wear any other color since that day in the woods, pushing food around her bowl. She hadn't slept well. None of them had. Miguel had been up at 4 a.m., packing the living room. Sofia had given up on sleep around 5 a.m. and started praying instead. "Is Rex coming?" Emma asked for the 100th time that morning. "Yes, baby," Officer Morrison promised. "Rex will be right there with you." "And the scary man," Emma's voice dropped to a whisper, "will he be there too?" Sofia's heart broke. How do you explain to a 3-year-old that she has to be in the same room as the man who tried to hurt her? That she has to look at him, speak about him, relive the worst day of her life while he sits just yards away? "He'll be there," Sofia said carefully, "but he can't hurt you. There will be police officers and the judge and Rex and Mommy will be right there in the room. You're safe, Emma. I promise you're safe." Emma didn't look convinced. At the courthouse, Judge Margaret Torres arrived at 6:30 a.m., a full 2 hours before the trial was scheduled to begin. She wanted to personally oversee every detail of the courtroom setup. This case would be scrutinized, appealed, and analyzed for years to come. There could be no mistakes. The bailiffs had constructed a partition exactly according to her specifications. A wooden screen, 4 feet high, positioned to the left of the witness stand. From the jury's position, they wouldn't be able to see what was behind it. But from the witness chair, Emma would have a clear view. That's where Rex would be stationed. Torres walked through the courtroom one more time, checking sight lines, making sure the microphone was positioned low enough for a small child, verifying that the step stool was stable. She'd ordered the court reporter to take extra care with transcription. Every word Emma spoke, no matter how quietly, needed to be captured accurately. Defense attorney Robert Hutchinson arrived at 7:15 a.m. in an expensive charcoal suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. He'd held a press conference the previous evening, calling the trial a miscarriage of justice, and promising to expose the prosecution's manipulation of a vulnerable child. He was playing to the cameras, building his appeal strategy even before the trial began. But privately, he was worried. The competency hearing had shaken him more than he'd admit. That little girl had been remarkably clear, remarkably consistent, and juries loved children. They especially loved brave children who'd survived trauma. He needed to discredit her testimony without appearing to attack a 3-year-old, a nearly impossible balance. Prosecutor Janet Harper arrived at 7:30 a.m. looking exhausted. She'd rehearsed with Emma a dozen times over the past month, always with Rex present, always keeping sessions short to avoid overwhelming the child. Emma knew what to expect: the big room, the people watching, the judge in the black robe. But knowing and experiencing were 2 different things. Harper had one advantage. Emma wasn't just a victim. She was a witness who'd provided information that cracked a major case. The recovered evidence from the woods had been matched definitively to the Prestige Jewelers robbery. Marcus Chen's fingerprints were on the duffel bag. His DNA was on the handle of the shovel they'd found nearby. Without Emma, they never would have known where to look. Her testimony wasn't just about what happened to her. It was about proving Chen's guilt in a $85,000 armed robbery. Marcus Chen entered the courtroom at 8:15 a.m., flanked by two deputies. He was dressed in a navy suit, his tattoos covered by long sleeves, his expression calm and almost bored. He'd maintained his innocence from the beginning. He knew nothing about any robbery, had never been in those woods, and certainly hadn't chased any child. Someone was framing him. Maybe the real robber had planted evidence near a property where Chen had worked, knowing he'd be an easy target with his criminal history. It was a thin defense, but Hutchinson would make it sing. He'd paint Chen as a reformed man, someone who'd made mistakes in his youth but had gone straight. He'd emphasize the circumstantial nature of the evidence. And most importantly, he'd create reasonable doubt about whether a 3-year-old's memory could be trusted. At 8:45 a.m., Officer Jake Morrison arrived with Rex. The German Shepherd was in full working mode, vest on, alert and focused. Morrison had given him extra training over the past month, ensuring Rex would remain perfectly still during testimony, that he wouldn't bark or move unless Emma needed him to. The dog seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. His brown eyes were serious, watchful. They positioned Rex behind the partition, out of sight from the gallery and jury, but visible from the witness stand. Morrison attached his lead to a floor bolt that had been installed specifically for this purpose. Rex sat, his gaze fixed on the doorway where Emma would enter. By 8:55 a.m., the courtroom was packed. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Reporters, legal observers, Sofia and Miguel Rodriguez in the front row, community members who joined the search that terrible night. Judge Torres had imposed strict rules. No phones, no recording devices, absolute silence during the child's testimony. Anyone who disrupted the proceeding would be removed immediately. The jury filed in at exactly 9:00 a.m. 7 women, 5 men, ranging in age from 24 to 67. They'd been selected carefully, questioned extensively about their ability to fairly evaluate a child witness. Several had young children or grandchildren of their own. They looked nervous, aware they were part of something unprecedented. Marcus Chen sat at the defense table, whispering with Hutchinson. He glanced once at the partition and smirked slightly, as if the whole setup was ridiculous. Judge Torres took her seat. All rise for the jury. The formalities began, opening statements, procedural matters. Harper's opening was emotional but factual, laying out how Emma's innocent walk into the woods had led to witnessing a crime, and how a dangerous criminal had hunted a 3-year-old to protect his secret. Hutchinson's opening was clinical, emphasizing reasonable doubt, the unreliability of young children, the lack of direct evidence. And then the moment arrived. The prosecution calls Emma Rodriguez to the stand. The courtroom door opened, and every head turned. Emma entered holding her mother's hand, her purple dress bright against the wood-paneled walls. She looked impossibly tiny walking down the center aisle, her white shoes barely making sound on the floor. Her eyes were wide, scanning the room, so many people, so many faces staring at her. Sofia walked her to the front, gave her hand one final squeeze, then had to step away. Emma stood alone before the witness stand, looking up at Judge Torres, who smiled down at her with all the warmth she could muster. "Hello, Emma, you're doing great. Do you see where Rex is?" Emma's eyes darted to the partition. She couldn't see him yet, but she knew he was there. "Let me help you up," the bailiff said gently, lifting Emma onto the witness chair. The step stool helped, but she still looked swallowed by the large wooden seat. Judge Torres leaned forward. "Emma, you remember what we talked about telling the truth." "Yes," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible even with the microphone. "Good, now I'm going to ask you to promise to tell the truth today. Can you do that?" "I promise." "Thank you, Emma. Ms. Harper will ask you some questions now." Janet Harper approached slowly, her expression gentle. "Hi, Emma, how are you today?" "Okay," Emma said, but her hands were gripping the arms of the chair so tightly her knuckles were white. Emma, do you remember the day you went to Grandma's house for the barbecue? A nod. Can you tell us what happened that day? Emma opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her breathing was getting faster. She was starting to panic. That's when she saw him. Marcus Chen, sitting at the defense table, was staring directly at her. The same cold eyes she'd seen in the woods. The same face that had haunted her nightmares for months. Emma's face went white. Her whole body began to shake. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I can't, she whimpered. Mommy, I can't. Sophia started to rise from her seat, but the bailiff stopped her. Judge Torres called for a recess, but Dr. Sarah Williams was already moving toward the bench. She whispered urgently to Harper and the judge. When court resumed 3 minutes later, Judge Torres made an announcement. The witness is experiencing severe anxiety. We're going to try one more approach. Emma, can you talk to Rex? Just tell Rex what happened. You don't have to look at anyone else. Just Rex. The bailiff adjusted the partition slightly. Now Emma could see Rex clearly. His gentle brown eyes, his alert ears, his steady presence. Emma's tears slowed. She reached out toward the partition, even though she couldn't quite touch him from the witness stand. Rex, she whispered. The German shepherd's tail moved just once, a gentle acknowledgement. And then, to everyone's amazement, Rex did something extraordinary. He barked just once, soft and encouraging. Emma smiled through her tears. She wiped her eyes with her small hand. And the courtroom held its breath, waiting to see if a 3-year-old and a dog could deliver justice. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. 200 people held their breath as Emma Rodriguez, still wiping tears from her cheeks, turned her full attention to the German shepherd behind the partition. Her small voice, amplified by the microphone, was barely above a whisper, but every word was captured. Rex, I was on the swing, Emma began, her eyes locked on the dog. I was going really high. Then I saw Grandma's cat, Whiskers, and I wanted to pet him, so I followed him into the woods. Prosecutor Janet Harper stood perfectly still, knowing any movement might break the fragile connection between child and dog. She'd rehearsed this, but nothing could have prepared her for the raw emotion of watching it unfold in real time. The cat went far, far away, Emma continued, her hand reaching toward Rex even though she couldn't quite touch him. And then I heard a sound, like digging, so I went to look. What did you see, Emma? Harper asked gently, her voice soft as a prayer. Emma's eyes never left Rex. I saw a man. He had a big shovel and he was digging a hole by the big tree with the broken branch, the tree where Daddy and me saw the bird nest. Can you describe the man? He had pictures on his arms, Rex, colors, blue and red and green, pretty pictures, but his face wasn't pretty, his face was mean. Several jurors leaned forward, completely captivated. This wasn't the confused rambling they'd been warned to expect from a 3-year-old. This was clear, specific, detailed observation. What else did you see? Harper prompted. He had a big bag, red and black. He put it in the hole, then he put dirt on top. He was breathing hard, Rex. He was sweating. Emma paused, her voice dropping even lower. That's when he saw me. The courtroom seemed to collectively stop breathing. What happened when he saw you, Emma? Emma's grip on the chair arms tightened. His eyes got big, then they got mean, really, really mean, he said. He said, hey, little girl. Emma's voice broke slightly, but it wasn't nice. It was scary, so I ran. You ran away. Yes, I ran so fast, Rex. My shoes fell off, but I kept running, and he was behind me. I could hear him. His feet were loud. He was saying, stop, kid, come back here. But I didn't stop. I ran and ran. Sophia Rodriguez was crying silently in the gallery, her hand pressed to her mouth. Miguel had his arm around her, his own eyes glistening. Where did you go? Harper asked. I found the tunnel, the dark tunnel. I crawled inside really far and I was very, very quiet, like when we play hide and seek. Emma's voice was shaking now. I heard him outside. He was looking for me. He said bad words, he said. He said he just wanted to talk. But I knew he was lying, Rex, I knew, so I stayed quiet. How long did you stay in the tunnel? Emma shrugged, the gesture heartbreakingly childlike. A long, long time. It got dark. It got cold. I was so scared. I thought the scary man would find me. I thought I'd never see Mommy again. Judge Torres discreetly wiped her eyes with a tissue. Emma, Harper said, do you see the man from the woods here in this courtroom today? This was the moment. The identification, everything hinged on this. Emma's eyes finally left Rex. They scanned the courtroom, moving across the jury, the bailiffs, the gallery. Then they landed on Marcus Chen at the defense table. Her whole body went rigid. Him, she whispered. That's him, Rex, that's the scary man. She was pointing directly at Marcus Chen with a trembling finger. Chen's expression didn't change, but Hutchinson's jaw tightened. The identification was clear, unequivocal, and devastating. Thank you, Emma, Harper said softly. You're being so brave. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Torres looked at Hutchinson. Your witness, counselor. Robert Hutchinson approached the stand slowly, carefully, like someone approaching a frightened animal. He knew he was walking a tightrope. He needed to challenge her testimony without appearing to bully a 3-year-old in front of a jury. Hello, Emma, he said, his voice gentle. My name is Mr. Hutchinson. Emma looked at him warily, then back to Rex. Emma, you love Rex, don't you? Yes, Emma said to the dog. And Rex is a very good dog. He saved you. Yes. Emma, when you were in that tunnel, that pipe in the woods, were you very scared? Yes. So scared that maybe your imagination was playing tricks on you. Emma frowned, not understanding. Hutchinson tried another approach. Emma, do you ever have bad dreams, nightmares? Sometimes. And in those nightmares, scary things happen, right? Yes. Sometimes when we're very scared, our mind can mix up what's real and what's imagined. Like dreams and real life get confused. Does that make sense? Emma looked at Rex for a long moment. Then she said something that made the entire courtroom gasp. Rex is real. The scary man is real. The bad dreams are because of the real scary man. The logic was simple, pure, and absolutely devastating to the defense's strategy. Hutchinson pressed on. Emma, you said the man had picture on his arms. Do you mean tattoos? I don't know that word. The colored pictures, were they like drawings? Yes, drawings on his skin. Emma, lots of people have tattoos. Have you ever seen tattoos before that day? Mommy's friend has a butterfly on her foot. So you've seen tattoos before. Could you maybe be remembering someone else's tattoos? Maybe someone from the barbecue. Emma's eyes flashed with something unexpected, indignation. Even at 3, she knew she was being told she was wrong when she knew she was right. She turned to Rex and her voice grew stronger, more insistent. Rex, it was him. I saw him. He was digging. He saw me. He chased me. It was him. The passion in her voice, the absolute certainty, was more powerful than any adult testimony could have been. Hutchinson tried a few more questions, but Emma had found her voice now. She answered each one consistently, clearly, always directing her responses to Rex but never wavering in her account. Finally, Hutchinson gave up. No further questions. As Emma finished testifying, something extraordinary happened. Judge Torres asked if Emma wanted to say goodbye to Rex before leaving the stand. Can I hug him? Emma asked. Yes, sweetheart. The bailiff lifted Emma down, and she ran to the partition. Officer Morrison guided her behind it, and Emma threw her arms around Rex's neck, burying her face in his fur. Good boy, Rex, she whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch. You helped me be brave. You're my hero. Rex, who'd been perfectly still throughout the entire testimony, did something that no one had planned, no one had coached, no one could have predicted. He gently licked the tears from Emma's cheek. Then he let out one soft, approving bark, and his tail wagged not frantically but slowly, deliberately, as if to say, "You did it. You were brave. I'm proud of you." That's when the courtroom erupted. Not in chaos but in tears. Jurors openly wept. The court reporters' shoulders shook. Hardened police officers in the gallery wiped their eyes. Even Judge Torres had to call for a recess because she couldn't maintain her composure. But the most powerful reaction was from the jury foreman, a 62-year-old grandfather named Thomas Wright. Years later, he would tell reporters, "In that moment when that little girl hugged that dog and that dog gave her that look of pride, I knew. We all knew. She was telling the truth, every word." Sophia rushed forward and scooped Emma into her arms, holding her daughter like she'd never let go. Emma was exhausted, emotionally drained, but she was smiling. "Mommy, I did it," she said. "Rex helped me and I wasn't scared." Marcus Chen sat frozen at the defense table, his confident smirk finally gone. For the first time since his arrest, he looked worried. Because he'd just been taken down by a 3-year-old and a dog, and the whole world had witnessed it. The defense called no witnesses. Robert Hutchinson knew when he was beaten. After Emma's testimony, putting Marcus Chen on the stand would be suicide. The man had the emotional warmth of a shark, and the jury had just fallen in love with a 3-year-old and her hero dog. Instead, Hutchinson rested his case, banking everything on his closing argument. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, packing before the jury, "we all felt something powerful in this courtroom. That little girl's courage moved us, but emotion cannot be the basis for a conviction. The prosecution wants you to send my client to prison based on the memories of a 3-year-old child. A child who was traumatized, terrified, lost in the dark for 18 hours. Could she have seen someone else? Could fear have distorted her memory? Could she have confused details from nightmares with reality? These are reasonable doubts, and reasonable doubt means acquittal." But when prosecutor Janet Harper stood for her closing, she didn't rely on emotion. She relied on facts. Marcus Chen's fingerprints were on that duffel bag. His DNA was on the shovel. The stolen property was buried exactly where Emma said she saw a man digging. The tattoos she described match Mr. Chen's tattoos precisely, patterns she couldn't have seen anywhere else because he kept them covered at the barbecue. She described his blue shirt, the same shirt found in his apartment with soil matching the burial site. Emma Rodriguez didn't just witness a crime. She solved one. Harper paused, looking each juror in the eye. Emma was 3 years old when Marcus Chen decided his freedom was worth more than her life. He left her in those woods to die. She was barefoot, freezing, hunted, and she survived because she was smart enough to hide and brave enough to speak. Don't let her courage be for nothing. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 17 minutes. When they returned, Thomas Wright, the foreman, looked directly at Marcus Chen as he read the verdict. "On the charge of armed robbery in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of evidence tampering, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of attempted kidnapping, we find the defendant guilty." Sophia Rodriguez collapsed in her husband's arms, sobbing with relief. In the gallery, members of the search party who'd looked for Emma that terrible night embraced each other. Officer Morrison, sitting with Rex in the back row, placed his hand on the dog's head and whispered, "Good boy. Justice, Rex. We got justice." Marcus Chen showed no emotion as the deputies led him away. But as he passed the prosecution table, he glanced at the empty witness stand where a 3-year-old had destroyed his lies, and for just a moment his mask slipped. He looked defeated. 6 weeks later, at the sentencing hearing, Judge Margaret Torres addressed the courtroom with unusual emotion. "Mr. Chen, you committed armed robbery, a serious crime, but your actions after that crime were even more reprehensible. When a 3-year-old child inadvertently witnessed you hiding evidence, you made a choice. You could have led her back to her family. You could have done nothing. Instead, you hunted her. You chased a barefoot toddler through the woods and left her to die of exposure. The fact that Emma Rodriguez survived is no thanks to you. It's thanks to her own courage, the dedication of law enforcement, and the remarkable intelligence of a search and rescue dog. Torres looked down at her papers. I'm sentencing you to 15 years for armed robbery, 3 years for evidence tampering, 5 years for child endangerment, and 8 years for attempted kidnapping. These sentences will run consecutively. Mr. Chen, you will serve 31 years in state prison. The gallery erupted in applause. Judge Torres didn't silence them. But the story didn't end with a verdict. The real ending was about healing. Emma continued therapy with Dr. Sarah Williams for 18 months. Officer Morrison brought Rex for visits twice a week initially, then once a week, then once a month as Emma's need for the dog's presence gradually decreased. The nightmares faded. The bedwetting stopped. The panic attacks became less frequent, then rare, then memories. By her 4th birthday, Emma could talk about the day I got lost without crying. By her 5th birthday, she could play in her grandmother's backyard without fear. The woods that had once been a place of terror slowly became just woods again, a place for adventure and imagination, not monsters. Rex received the Medal of Valor from the Pennsylvania State Police, the highest honor awarded to K-9 officers. Officer Morrison framed the commendation and hung it in their home, but he knew the real reward was simpler: a little girl who could sleep through the night again. The legal impact of the case rippled across the country. Within 2 years, 12 states had passed Emma's Law, legislation specifically addressing the use of facility animals for child witnesses in criminal trials. Law schools added the case to their curricula. Psychology programs studied Emma's testimony as an example of trauma-informed justice. But perhaps the most important change happened in courtrooms themselves. Judges became more willing to accommodate vulnerable witnesses, to recognize that justice sometimes requires innovation, and that a child's voice matters even when that voice is very small. Emma started kindergarten at age 5, a bright, happy child who loved books and finger painting and playing with her best friend Hannah. Her teacher, Mrs. Palmer, knew Emma's story. Everyone in Millerville did, but she saw no broken victim in her classroom. She saw a leader, a child with unusual empathy and courage. One day, when another child was scared of the school's therapy dog during a visit, Emma knelt beside him. "It's okay," she said gently. "Dogs help us when we're scared. My friend Rex helped me when I was very, very scared. And now I'm not scared anymore. See, you don't have to be scared either." The boy stopped crying and petted the dog. Mrs. Palmer watched with tears in her eyes. On a crisp Saturday morning in October, 2 years after the trial, the Rodriguez family visited Officer Morrison and Rex. They did this every few months now, not because Emma needed it therapeutically, but because they'd become friends. Family. Emma, now 5 years old and growing like a weed, ran into Morrison's backyard where Rex was waiting. The German Shepherd, now 9 years old with a bit of gray around his muzzle, stood and wagged his tail with the enthusiasm of a puppy. "Rex," Emma threw her arms around him, "I missed you." Rex licked her face, and Emma giggled, a sound that never got old for the adults watching. They had a picnic that afternoon. Emma told Rex all about kindergarten, about her new teacher, about the book she was learning to read. She spoke to him like an old friend because that's what he was. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Emma sat beside Rex on the grass. She rested her head against his side, and the dog's tail thumped contentedly against the ground. "Rex," Emma said softly, "thank you for finding me. Thank you for making me brave." Rex turned and looked at her with those wise brown eyes. If dogs could smile, he was smiling. Officer Morrison watched from the porch, a lump in his throat. He thought about that terrible night in the rain, searching the dark woods, Rex pulling him toward a hidden drainage pipe. He thought about the terrified child who wouldn't come out until a dog showed her it was safe. He thought about the courtroom, the tears, the moment when a 3-year-old found her voice. "Come on, Emma," Sophia called. "Time to go home, honey." Emma gave Rex one more hug. "See you soon, Rex, I love you." As the Rodriguez family drove away, Morrison sat beside Rex on the porch steps. He scratched behind the dog's ears, and Rex leaned into him with a contented sigh. "You know what, boy," Morrison said quietly. "People talk about police work, about catching bad guys, about justice. But sometimes the most important thing we do is just show up when someone's scared and help them find their courage. You did that, Rex. You gave that little girl her voice back. You gave her her life back." Rex's tail wagged once, twice. Somewhere in the distance, Emma's laughter drifted on the evening breeze, the sound of a child who'd survived darkness and found light again. The sound of healing, the sound of hope, the sound of justice served not just in a courtroom but in a heart made whole. And that was the real ending to the story. Not a verdict or a sentence, but a 5-year-old girl playing in her backyard without fear, dreaming of becoming a veterinarian so she could help dogs like the one who'd saved her life. Because sometimes justice isn't just about punishment. Sometimes it's about a child learning to be brave again. And sometimes the most powerful voice in a courtroom belongs to someone who speaks the simple, unshakable truth. "Rex, I saw him, and now I'm not afraid anymore." The end.